Morning, everybody. Call to order our June 4th, 2019 regular meeting of the Board of Mason County Commissioners. Begin with our Pledge of Allegiance. If Mike Olson could please lead us.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mike. Item number 3, if the clerk would please take roll.
Commissioner District 1, Randy Netherland.
I'm here.
Commissioner District 2, Kevin Schutte.
Here.
Commissioner District 3, Sharon Trask.
I'm here.
Very good. Item number 4, correspondence and organizational business. Item 4.1, correspondence, if the clerk would please report.
Robert Pastor sent in a letter concerning building height allowances in Mason County. Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board sent liquor license applications for Tahuya Community Club at 14880 Northeast North Shore Road and Harstein Island Community Club located at 3371 East Harstein Island Road North in Shelton. And Herbert Larson sent in a letter regarding Lake Management District Number 3 for Spencer Lake.
Very good, thank you. Item 4.2, we have a news release on the temporary closure of Union Park, and staff to come forward and read it.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ross McDowell, Mason County Parks and Trails Manager.
We have a news release that will be going out today for the temporary closure of Union Park for dead tree removal. Mason County will be temporarily closing parts of the Union Park located at 61 East Port Townsend Street, Union, for 1 day in order to remove several dead trees. Union Park play area will be closed to the public on Tuesday, June 11th, 2011, and reopen on Wednesday, June 12th, 2011. This will allow the contractor and county parks and trail staff adequate time to log and remove the downed timbers. Citizen safety is a top priority for the county, and we would appreciate compliance with this temporary park closure and ask all residents to avoid entering the park. For further information, please contact Mason County Parks and Trails office at 360-427-9670, extension 535. Thank you.
Moving on to item number 5, this is our open forum for citizen input. It's an opportunity for members of the public to address the commission on items that are not on today's agenda. If you have any items to discuss that aren't on today's agenda, raise your hand. The chair will recognize you and come forward to the podium, state your name and where you live. Anyone for public comment?
Yep, that's okay. I moved over there to watch you anyway.
Okay, right.
First day with the podium in the new position.
Yeah. So my name is Constance Simpson, 6500 East State Route in Union. So I have a question of the staff about the closure of Union Park. What, did you just leave?
You did.
So I want to know if we had requested that the stumps be ground up and, you know, kind of not just stumps left there. And we also wanted to know if there was going to be replanting of any of those trees or shrubberies.
We'll get all that information and make sure you
So
contact
could
us.
you have Ross contact us? Okay, thank you.
Oh, there he is.
I'm sorry.
So,
Ross, are you gonna grind the stumps and are you gonna replant?
They are going to remove, Becos is going to remove all the stumpage themselves. And then replant, we're still deciding on that. One of the big things is to pick the right kind of trees that, since there's a new algae that's out right now that's hitting a lot of the hemlocks, I believe, we're gonna do some research before we replant, so to make sure that they're good trees.
so do you think you could just let the Canal Improvement Club know? And
Sure.
we could weigh in on that kind of stuff?
I would love info from you.
Okay, good.
Perfect,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Great.
Thank you for coming back.
Sure,
Thank you,
no
Rob.
problem. I'll wait with it, so.
Mike Olson, I live in the city limits of Shelton. Thanks for having me. I'm here today to let you know about a project, a community-minded project, and ask for your help and assistance in any way possible. This project is called the Mason County Veterans Memorial Boardwalk. And what we've done as a group of veterans of ours, we're trying to give a memorial to the veterans past, present, and future of Mason County. I've got some information I'll give to each of you. Basically, the project starts next to Lumberman's Green Yard. We'll go through the David Shelton Pear Orchard, and end up connecting up with the new park and ride that Mason Transit is taking on. For years, there's been very little recognition as far as anything physical, memorial of any sort for the veterans of Mason County. And many of the World War II veterans are in their 90s or dead, and the Vietnam veterans, of which I'm one, are into our late 60s and older. So I think it's time to, to do this for the veterans and, give them some recognition. Mason County is a home to a large percentage of veterans. They've built this community as most towns in America. And we just want to do this as a way of letting everybody, whether they're a veteran or not, participate in this. We will be selling memorial plaques, granite plaques that you can purchase that will help fund the project. That will you can engrave the name of a veteran, and we're not limiting the veterans. They didn't have to necessarily live in Mason County. If you're a resident of Mason County, we want your participation. This has been a project also that the city, not the veterans part, but the city had designed this as a connectivity project from the yacht club into downtown. And with Mason Transit doing a small portion of it, and we're going to do a small portion of it, and eventually I think that the yacht club will participate and bring it on over. So it's going to benefit the community in a number of ways also. I've heard from the yacht club that during Oyster Fest they get 30 boats that come in for that reason, and there's no way to get them around town, or very little. And so they're excited about this also, that we're going to have an opportunity to have a system of connectivity through the yacht club into downtown Shelton. It's going to be an expensive project, and I know that county governments and city governments are financially, on the edge a lot of times. So I don't know what exactly you can help with other than just your encouragement, and if there's any grants available that anybody would know about or to assist us with, we're looking for all resources. We've been in contact with many of the usual people in the community, corporations and private people that help with these kind of things. So we're really excited about this. We hope to start. One of the fellows thought we could do it this year, but I don't think we will. I think we'll be able to hit it next spring real early and possibly finish it and have it dedicated by next Veterans Day in November. So I can come back later and keep you updated on progress, and that's about all I have unless there's any questions. I've got more information here I'll give you, and it should get you going. Yes, sir.
I don't think Kelly finds a way to help on that as well. I think it's a fantastic thing. And I remind you that I heard about it at the union event, and Derek Kilmer, Congressman Kilmer, was very excited about it and was hoping that he could help.
And I would love for him to help. Yeah, if there's any way we can all connect up if necessary, I would love to give him a presentation or whatever is necessary. But I think it's a worthwhile project. I think that for too many years, especially everybody knows the story of Vietnam vets, how they were treated. And in fact, another side note that kind of helped me motivate to do this was the city recently went through a process of allowing a tiny home village for veterans. And there was quite a bit of public comment, and a large majority of it was from veterans. And there's two things that I really noticed on that. One was the amount of pride and camaraderie-ship that comes from people who are veterans, and how they're proud of their organization even if they don't have a way to express it. And the other one was how much pain is still out there from not only Vietnam veterans but people who have lost veterans from all the way from World War II. And I think this would be a great way to, everybody can have a piece of recognition in the county. So appreciate your time.
Appreciate you spearheading that. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 6, adoption of today's agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the agenda for today, June 4th, 2019.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to adopt the agenda for June 4th, 2019. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, and the motion carries. Item number 7, approval of minutes. We don't have any minutes to approve today. So we'll move on to item number 8, which is adoption of our action agenda. Commissioners will read through the items on the action agenda, at which point a commissioner or a member of the public can ask questions to determine if they'd like to have a item removed for a separate discussion and vote. I'll read item 8.1. Commissioner Netherland, if you'd please read 8.2, and Commissioner Trask 8.3. Item 8.1, approval of the professional services contract for the new Mason County Health Officer, Daniel E. Stein, M.D.
Item number 8.2, approval of warrants and treasurer's electronic remittance. Claims Clearing Fund, warrants number 8064388 through 8064653 for the amount of $907,247.21. Direct Deposit Fund, warrants number 59083 through 59474, the amount $701,067.70. Salary Clearing Fund, warrants number 7004440 through 7004466, the amount $488,657.63.
Item 8.3, approval to submit the 2019 through 2021 Local Solid Waste Funding Assistance, the LSWFA grant application to Department of Ecology, and authorize the Public Works Director and/or Deputy Director, Utilities and Waste Management to sign the necessary agreements.
Okay, having read through all of the items on today's action agenda, are there any items commissioners would like to have removed for a separate discussion or vote?
No.
Are there any members of the public that would like to have an item removed for a separate discussion or vote? Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move for the approval of the action agenda as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the action agenda as presented. Any additional discussion? I'd just like to extend a word of welcome to our new health officer for the county, Dr. Stein. I was part of the interview panel for that position, along with a number of folks from our County Board of Health. And it's just, we're excited to enter into this new chapter after Dr. Yu has retired after a number of years of tremendous service to the county. So we'll definitely miss her, but we're excited to welcome Dr. Stein in her place.
Just want to make clear it is Daniel E., not Frank N. Anybody get it?
Yep.
Frankenstein.
Any additional discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the motion carries. Moving on to item number 9, other business. Are there any department heads or electeds that would like to address the commission? Okay, hearing none, we have passed the 9:15 threshold, and so we'll move into item number 10, our public hearings. Beginning with item 10.1, a public hearing to consider a rezone request for 30 acres in rural residential 5, RR5, to rural tourist campground RTC, and I'd ask staff to come forward and brief.
Morning, Commissioners. Kel Rowan with Mason County Planning Department. And this is a proposed rezone from rural residential 5 to rural tourist campground. There are 2 parcels, and they consist of about 30 acres. And it's off of Fireweed Lane in the southeast portion of Mason County. And this land was owned by a family that deeded it over, gifted it to a nonprofit agency called Impact Northwest, and it's a nonprofit group that takes youth and does outdoor survival activities and camping, and this property would not be developed for residential or other uses, with the exception of a possible shelter in the future of around 2,000 square feet. And it's going to be used just for some primitive camping and small groups at a time during the during the camping season, not likely in the winter. And there is a representative here, but if you have any questions.
I have one question. So when it went through the planning commission initially, it was voted down, and then there was more deliberation, and then it was unanimously recommended for approval.
Correct.
Can you kind of just walk us through some of that?
Sure. Yes, there were several community members from the neighborhood, from the Fireweed Road, that came out to just get more information about what the rezone was about, what the future use might be, concerns about the gravel road, concerns about fires, just kind of the impact on the overall community. And once I think they heard what the use, who the new owner is, what it would be used for, and got their questions answered, it seemed like they were more amenable to the rezone, and so the PAC ended up taking another vote and then ended up passing it unanimously.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions for staff? That would have been mine, actually.
Thank you. Any questions from the public for staff before we move into public testimony?
Yeah, I was just curious, if this property were to change hands and we have it rezoned, could the potential for a new owner come in and do different with that property than what's proposed?
My understanding from the deed is that the previous owner has already gifted it over to the new owners, Impact Northwest, and they have that. If they are not going to use it for the purposes of which they state, the primitive camping and such, it would go back to the Sly family. The zoning would stay the same. They'd have to get it rezoned back, or it would just remain the same. But you would have to do another rezone if that were the desire of the Sly Family Trust.
I understand, but I guess if we're rezoning, doesn't the zoning go with the parcel no matter who the owner is?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so does that campground zoning then allow for campgrounds greater than the use? I'm all for what they're planning on doing. I'm just wondering if 10 years from now, they change it over to, let's say, a RV park. Is that potential under that zoning?
An RV park would be a potential under that zoning, but it would also, but that use would need to go through a special use permit. So there would be a public hearing with the county's hearing examiner, and additional, and that's sort of an impact of an RV park. Those things would be reviewed under a special use permit and another public hearing.
Or that rural campground zoning, would it be permitted without, or allowed without having that kind of a hearing? Does that make sense? In other words, if anybody else wants to change the plan, are they going to have to go back before the give special permit for that?
It would depend on what the proposed use was. There would be some minor things that would be allowed per the zoning, but other things that would have to go through a special use permit. So I'd have to know what the proposal would be.
Yeah, I live across the street, so I'm thinking
Sure.
10 years from
Yeah,
now. I mean,
I can
love the idea
share
of what they're gonna do.
Yep.
But
And I
just-
have the code section for rural tourist campground of what's permitted and what's not, and then what would be permitted with the special use permit.
Okay, thank you. That's
Yeah.
great.
Any other questions from the public? Okay. Now we'll move into the public comment period. If you'd like to make comment on item 10.1, come forward to the podium. I'll recognize you and just state your name where you live to make a comment. Any public comment on 10.1? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public comment period and move into commissioner deliberation or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the rezone request of nearly 30 acres from RR5 to RTC, Rural Tourist Campground.
Moved and seconded to rezone the request of 30 acres in rural residential 5 to rural tourist campground. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the motion carries. Moving on to item 10.2, a public hearing to consider amendments to Title 8, Chapter 8.52 Resource Ordinance relating to the Voluntary Stewardship Program, VSP, and again, ask staff to come forward and brief.
Hello, Kel Rowan with Mason County Planning. So the Voluntary Stewardship Program was adopted by the legislature in 2011, and then Mason County opted into the program in 2012. Ordinance 07-12 is the ordinance that adopted Mason County entering into the Voluntary Stewardship Program. Then we entered into an agreement with the Mason Conservation District to lead that program. The Conservation District and Barbara Atkins has worked on the work plan. There was a work group put together and a work plan that was created, and then this work plan was adopted by the Washington Conservation District at the state level. And once that work was completed, then Mason County and the Conservation District worked together to amend Title 8, Chapter 8.52, which is the Mason County Resource Ordinance, that indicates that agriculture uses are not regulated under the Resource Ordinance, but rather through the Voluntary Stewardship Program. Mason Conservation District is required to monitor the agricultural lands and the impacts on resource ordinance, or on resource critical areas. And I believe they have to do their every 2 years. Is it every 2 years they send in their monitoring report to the state? And ag lands take up about 2% of the property within Mason County, so it's a pretty small percentage. But this is the first time that the county, especially through the planning department, has resources for agriculture uses and farmers and growers. And I mean, there's always been the resource of the Conservation District, but this is the first time we're really working together so that we can, as if folks come into the county planning department, we can reference them to the Conservation District and through the work plan and work on best management practices, et cetera. And that's not something that the planning department's been able to provide in the past. So we're excited about this program and excited to make the amendments to the resource ordinance.
Questions from the commission for staff? Any questions from the public for staff?
Yeah, Cal, I read through the supporting documents that you sent to the commissioners, and I'm unclear if the bit about encouraging agricultural folks to utilize the open space program, if that got left in the VSP or if it got removed.
It was removed. Was it removed? Because they're unrelated. I mean, everything's related, but it's not. I don't know what the connection is for.
Can I ask you, do you mind presenting, because based on his question, still in here, it says encourage a voluntary enrollment of agricultural lands and uses into the open space tax program and agricultural activities into the voluntary stewardship program. Is that,
okay.
so it's still there?
It is still there.
But the word is voluntary.
Yes, okay. I just wanted to make sure, because I was unclear when I read through it. And I'm curious, were my comments letter about this submitted to the Board of County Commissioners?
It's not in this packet.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Hearing no other questions for staff, we'll move into public comment period. Again, if you'd like to make comment, raise your hand, come forward to the podium, state your name. Dave?
Ken Van Buskirk, Davis Farm Road in Belfair. And I wanted to thank Kel for clarifying, because I was really unclear about that comment, whether that voluntary enrollment was in there or not. I did make some comments in support of the voluntary stewardship program, and I was hoping that you'd be able to see those, but I didn't bring them with me. And but I think it's a good deal, and I encourage you to adopt it.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Any additional comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public comment period and move into commissioner deliberation or motion.
I'll move that we approve the amendments to Title 8, Chapter 8.52, the resource ordinance.
I will second.
Moved and seconded to approve the amendments to Title 8, Chapter 8.52 Resource Ordinance. Any additional discussion? Just a word of thanks to the Conservation District for their continued work on this, as well as our staff. It's kind of a heavy lift over a long period of time, and so it's nice to continue to move this forward, so much appreciated. Call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? And the motion carries. Okay, moving on to item 10.3, a public hearing to consider code amendments to Title 17 zoning relating to raising height limits in certain zones within the urban growth areas of Allen, Belfair, and Shelton, and rural commercial zones 3, 4, and 5. And once again, ask staff to come forward and brief.
Okay, this is consideration to raise height limits in Mason County. This was first brought to my attention in the Joint Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioner meeting that we had to talk about our 2019 work program. I believe we had that meeting in February, and or perhaps it was March. But so we created the work plan, and one of the items was to look at increasing height limits in the Belfair UGA. And so as staff, I just looked at the county overall, and is there other locations that may make sense to increase height limits? Currently, height limits are limited to 35 feet. For the most part, there are some zones within, I know Belfair UGA, and perhaps Shelton as well, where it's 45 feet in certain zones, and then industrial zones also have an allowance for increased height limits under certain circumstances. So I looked at Belfair, Allen, Shelton UGAs, as well as the rural areas and rural commercial zones within the rural areas, and proposed raising height limits to up to 55 feet. At the Planning Commission, we just had a good deliberation about the different zones and height limits and appropriateness, and what ultimately the Planning Commission voted on was to approve increasing height limits up to 55 feet with a special use permit. So if the height limit is limited to 35 feet, then it could be allowed up to 55 feet with a special use permit. In those zones that were 45 feet, that would remain at 45 unless with a special use permit. I believe there's one zone, the mixed use zone in Belfair urban growth area. I believe we increased to 55 feet outright without requiring the special use permit. Except for, yes, so we did increase it to 55, from 45 to 55, except that on the west side of SR3, they shall not reach an elevation of more than 35 feet above the grade level of the roadway within 150 feet of the SR3 right-of-way. But otherwise, the Planning Commission did adopt to increase the height limits. If you have any questions, I'm happy to.
Commissioner?
Was there ever any discussion or contemplation of a requirement for a public water system with a proper fire flow, especially because of that height, or anything because it's such a major construction, the requirement that sewer must be available?
No, we did not discuss that, but presumably under the special use permit requirement, which would require a public hearing with the hearing examiner, we could address all of those items. View impacts, bulk dimensional impacts, but also fire flow, traffic impacts on, just the density, and all those issues together. Sewer.
No, that's all I have.
So I have a couple of technical fire suppression questions, if maybe we could.
And our fire marshal is here, so if I
That's it,
can't
our
answer
fire
them,
marshal.
I
Yeah,
hope to
but-
call on him to address
Would you
this.
mind?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Commissioner Nolan, I think, brings up a really valid point about fire flow in these buildings, and I've had a number of conversations with chiefs in the areas that would be affected by this potential change, particularly the UGAs. But I was curious because I'm concerned about making this change for the rural activity centers, in particular for Union and Hoodsport, given those fire flow potential issues. I know that the preference for the fire service is to have fire suppression in buildings that would be, this size and height. But can you speak to any potential fire flow concerns? I know
As an example, in Union, we have Alderbrook, I'm sure they're sprinkled. If you go into Fire District 4, which would be in the Taylortown rack, you would have Little Creek, which I know is sprinkled. How do they manage the fire flow issues, and just if you could provide some general thoughts on how this would affect the fire service in the county?
Yeah, absolutely. Am I right here? You want me to?
Whatever's easiest for Diedrich.
Can you hear me from here, Diedrich? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So fire flow, we currently have an ordinance on the record for addressing fire flow. In the fire code book, you need to have a hydrant within 400 feet-ish that supplies a certain amount of fire flow, and that's all dictated by the code it's adopted. Years ago, Mason County went, well, that's kind of unrealistic. We wouldn't have any buildings in Mason County because we don't have fire hydrants all over the place like City of Seattle does. So your concern about fire flow, we've already addressed that through mitigation options. Alderbrook, great example. Sprinkler building, they put the infrastructure in because it's a hotel, it's a different type of occupancy than, let's say, the Union City Market that we've just addressed, and they opted to put in some mitigation factors, firewalls, fire alarm systems, because they were unable to provide the fire flow required for that size of building. So in fire flow, in suppression systems, that's all engineered and calculated. If they're not able to provide that, then they have to fall under the mitigation options, which we do currently. So that's all addressed in a building permit standpoint. And typically there's ways to get to that answer of having a larger building.
So then those are more maybe commercial structures. If we were to, you know, in your neck of the woods in Belfair, if we were to see multifamily housing come in as a result of this, and let's just say it's a 50-foot building, what kind of fire suppression? Similar or?
Yeah, so fortunately for Belfair, I mean, they have a great water system going down Highway 3 corridor and off to some of the areas off of Highway 3. But multifamily building, multiple stories, that's already addressed in the fire code to have certain fire suppression systems. So when a fire suppression system is required by code, the mitigation options aren't there. I mean, the code, especially for a multifamily dwelling, requiring a sprinkler system, they would have to follow those rules anyways, because the code dictates, state law dictates that they have to have that. So the height, you know, the 55-foot structure, from our standpoint, we'd rather you just follow the code or get you to that point than saying 55 feet. You can't have that because our ladders don't reach that high. We'd rather just, the code's the code. I gave an example, I think Commissioner Netherland, that you know, Seattle has 100-story buildings. Their ladder trucks don't reach 100 stories. How they mitigate those is through fire protection systems, which is required by the fire code. And from the fire service standpoint, we'd rather have all the fire suppression systems and fire detection systems in the building.
So in your opinion, you don't see this as being in conflict with, number one, fire district resources in the county, or current code?
I'll speak to North Mason Regional Fire Authority, and some of the other districts. I contacted Chief Mike Patty, which he's in the middle of a hydrant flow test, consequently. And we had a discussion along with District 4, which is another one of the areas in Taylortown. And our opinion is we would rather the code be the code than restricting it because we don't have a ladder truck, if that makes sense. So in North Mason Regional Fire Authority, we don't see an issue with this at all.
Thank you. Okay, any additional questions, commissioners? Any questions from the public before we move into public comment?
Go ahead.
I have a few questions, mainly based on the minutes from the past meeting. And I wonder if you could tell me what the current tallest residential structure in the EPA is in Delaware.
Residential?
Yeah.
You mean what's existing out there? And I have not gone out and measured, so
Okay.
I'm not aware of if there are buildings
Okay.
taller than 35 feet.
Okay, thank you. And in the minutes of the PAC meeting, it says that you began by explaining that the BOCC had requested the PAC review height limits of Belfair. It was actually just a single commissioner, wasn't it, that requested the height limit change?
I can speak to that. I was interested in having the PAC review that as well, and I think I made comment to that at the joint PAC BOCC meeting.
And so did the other commissioner at that time, all three.
Oh, okay. You mentioned in the PAC minutes that there was a copy of some comments sent from Mark Ziegler from the city of Shelton. Were those provided to the BOCC?
Yes.
Were they available to the public to consider on the?
Yeah, those are available. They're in briefing packets, I believe, and the action agenda packets.
Current packet for this particular hearing, and I thought they should have been.
I do have those available.
Okay, but I just wanted to make sure, was it in the packet for the meeting today?
No.
Not for today, but.
Not for today,
Okay,
it was
well-
the more recent ones that came in after the briefing
Okay.
packets.
Thank you. Is the statement that you made at the PAC meeting that Kel stated she didn't feel like this would be used very often, but thought if development was proposed, why not let it happen? Is that statement correct?
I don't know what I said exactly, but I did make the argument during the planning commission meeting that if there were a proposal, if a developer had a proposal for a building, and it worked out for them that the development would, there would be a return on their investment and they could build to 55 feet and it fit the wants and needs of the community, I didn't see a need to restrict. If we can go to 55 feet, there wouldn't be a need to restrict it. And what is nice about the special use permit requirement is that there is a public hearing to address things like view impact. Not every lot would be appropriate for a structure of 35 feet, but there may be lots that are completely appropriate for 55 feet if a developer had a proposal that would allow, that the market would allow that structure to be built within the zone that was that would permit that. So typically a commercial zone or multifamily.
And at the very end of the discussion at the PAC meeting, one of the PAC members asked about the other comment letter I submitted about the sub-area plan, and the minutes didn't reflect any discussion. Was there any discussion amongst PAC members about that second letter?
I don't recall.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I would like to ask the fire marshal a few questions. So I live in Union in Fire District 6, and we have a few hydrants, and they are maintained by PUD1. And it just happens, because of another reason, I was asking PUD1 about where they were and how many we had, and then with the fire department. So they both indicated that it's really the hydrants would be to fill up water in the pumper trucks. It wouldn't be anything where they could use, there's not enough pressure in the water flow for those hydrants. And also, I think it includes the one at Albuquerque at the subdivision. So can you address that? I mean, we talked about Regional Fire Authority 2 and then 4, but.
I could generically address that if you'd like. The Alderbrook system is separate from the other system you're
Right.
referring to. They're two
Right.
separate designs. The Alderbrook system, I am aware that it gets tested.
Yeah,
I
I
believe
know
it's a
that.
private system that's owned by Alderbrook.
Right.
The other system, the PUD1 system,
Mhm.
when they say that it's used to fill up pumper trucks, there's quite a few systems in our county that are like that, where they may not have the fire flow, but they have the water capacity, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
And in those systems, typically what they'll do is they'll use it to fill their big water trucks, and then bring it to the fire scene, and then use the water truck as kind of the mobile hydrant, if you will.
Yeah.
And those are all assessed during building plan review. So when we go out, simply having a hydrant in front of your business does not mean that that will produce fire flow. So if you're gonna build a business, and this is how it's been in the time that I've been here, we wanna know the data on that hydrant. We're not just gonna say, oh, it's a yellow thing with caps on it, it works. We wanna have them professionally flow tested. We offer that service, through the county to do that for them. And then the fire flow data that's provided by that hydrant matches this, chart in the fire code. It says, if your business is this big and it's built with this type of construction and this type of occupancy, then it has to have this much fire flow for this long of time. So there's kind of a math equation that goes with it.
So the county maintains those, like even in Fire District 6, not PUD1?
PUD maintains,
Okay.
the water purveyors
Okay. Okay.
do preventive maintenance on their systems. And and I don't want to speak for PUD1, I don't know how long they've owned that system. The PUD does own a couple systems within my jurisdiction too, and they maintain those hydrants. If you want the fire flow data, you can call them, or I might have some in the area. If you want to call my office, I can help you out.
No, I kind of got it from the PUD1. So I have just a quick question for Cal, and that is, Cal, so currently, walk me through, this is the way people have an idea about a building, a project that they want to do. They can't understand the codes, it's really not mentioned in the comprehensive plan, so they book a pre-planning conference, or a planner suggests that to them, right?
Well, all commercial, everything that's non-single-family residential, typically, we require a pre-sub conference. Yeah, a pre-application conference, and those are required. And so, if we allow a 55-foot height building, let's say it's just allowed anywhere, it still has to meet all of the codes, building code, fire code, all of those things. So if they can't meet that, they can't get a 55-foot height limit.
So, right now, if someone came in and it's commercial, and it really looked like, gee, we want it to be 47 feet, can you explain to me how you would tell them to go about being able to build it at 47 feet?
Well, they would, I personally can't, because I don't do building code or fire code, but I would attend that meeting as far as, does it meet the zoning, here's what your setbacks are, here's your height limit, here's your parking that's required, etc. Then the building department and the fire department also go through their codes, environmental health goes through their codes, public works goes through all their, so we all have our certain requirements that people have to meet. And if they can meet all of that, and they still can make a return on their investment, they can.
So, but is there a possibility that the applicant could request a variance or a special use permit at that time and say, could I accomplish this? I pay these fees, then
If the code allows it, so there's certain things, so let's say we adopted this, and there's a 35-foot height limit, except with a special use permit, you could go up to 55 feet. So then they could apply, if it was just a restriction of heights, and they wanted a 50-foot height building, they'd go through a special use permit requirement. They'd address a whole host of issues like you're bringing up. In addition to, can they just meet the basic code requirements?
But wasn't that opportunity for an applicant or a property developer to use the special use permit there all along?
No, only maybe in some zones, but a 35-foot height limit, there is no variance. Or if the height limit is 35 feet, that's it. You can't build above that. There's no variance criteria, because to meet variance criteria, you have to meet minimum reasonable use. And we'd say the minimum reasonable use is 35 feet. So there is no circumstance in which someone could apply for, currently, where someone could apply for a variance or a special use permit to get to 55 feet under the current code. So they are restricted to 35 feet, or in certain circumstances, we do have 45 feet. And then, like I said, in the industrial zoning, there's some other flexibility. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for staff from the public? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move into public comment. And if you'd like to make public comment, raise your hand, shall recognize you, come forward and state your name for the record. Anyone for public comment? Ken.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ken Van Busker from Belfair. I'd first like to read a short email from Herb Gerhardt. He asked me to read this into the record. He sent it last Friday, it looks like, to the clerk of the board and to 2 of the county commissioners. And he says, regarding the hearing on building height increases, I'm concerned that the individual fire districts for these areas may not be able to fight fires at the new height level without having to purchase a new ladder truck. I want the commissioners to evaluate with each fire district that will be affected by this ordinance change to see if this change will cause them to purchase a new fire truck. If that is the case, the owner, builder, contractor would first need to purchase a new fire truck capable of fighting fires at the new maximum levels. Yes, this is an expensive proposition, but the cost should not be passed on to the local fire districts and consequently to their taxpayers. That cost should be borne by those who would benefit from being able to build taller buildings. Thanks for your consideration of this matter, Herb Gerhardt. So then, my testimony. I'd like you to table this matter, and you weren't provided with this document as part of the material, and I'd like to approach you and give you a copy of it if I could. And I'd like to submit this into the record for your consideration. This I submitted to the Planning Advisory Commission on April 15th, and it's a discussion about the joint meeting in which the commissioners expressed their top priorities, and I think the PAC was perhaps influenced by some of that discussion, and I'd just like you to consider that. The second thing that I'd like to enter into the record this is a copy from the Belfair sub-area plan, and a lot of work went into that Belfair sub-area plan. And frankly, I'm surprised that we're even having this discussion. If you look at the highlighted festival retail, for example, this was done close to 20 years ago. We had a height limit of 3 to 5 stories. And in the write-up for the festival retail, it says, quote, generally it'd be limited to 4 stories. However, 5 may be allowed if they provide for centralized pedestrian plaza space per design standards. Then you move over to mixed use. You can see down below it's 3 to 5 stories again, and it said, quote, overall residential densities in the mixed use zone will be limited by height limits, parking, and site constraints. So we did put a lot of work into this. If you go over to residential to R10, you see it down below, it says 3 to 4 stories, and I put a little printout from the multiple use residential designation on the back there. And in the map to the left, you can see there's 4 R10s. There's 5 now. You just approved a new R10 on the Roy Bode Road. And you see down there height limits and density 4 stories. We did put a lot of work into this, and I think to just raise it to 55 feet to perhaps increase the density is just not the right thing to do. And I appreciate you tabling this till you get a chance to consider all the comments and perhaps really put some thought into it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
My name is Constance Simpson, and I live at 6500 East State Route 106 in the Union Rural Activity Center. I belong to a couple of different organizations in the Union area, but today my comments will be strictly my own. So my concern when I first became aware of this, and not many people in the community where I live really are, we've been trying to get the word out. There's somewhat disbelief. Why do we need to do that? What does it mean? But for me, this seemed to have been done in almost, I would use the word cavalier kind of manner. And I've noticed in the last few years that when some issue comes up, rather than having people go through a variance process or a special use process and and planning staff works to really try to get property owners to be able to do what they want to do with their property, that we instead go and change the development regulations in the code. And then it just gets all confusing. I mean, then we have this just patchwork thing going on. And for me, this just does not seem to be good planning. And it may have started with the idea for the rural urban growth areas, but it's just inappropriate for Union, and it's just inappropriate for Union no matter kind of what. And also, when we were looking at the parcels that are currently zoned R3, RC3, and 4 and 5, you realize that the mapping that the GIS department has is not really reflective of what the community knows now to be existing commercial type uses. And so we don't know whether this is going to be for new commercial uses. Is it going to be redevelopment of old commercial uses? Are people then going to claim that the map is wrong and then they get a free pass? Or it's just too confusing. So I would really ask that you remove the Union Rural Activity Center from this these proposed changes on the height limit. Thank you.
Other public comment? Any other public comment on item 10.3? Okay, hearing none, we can close the public comment period and move into commissioner deliberation or motion.
I had some conversations this last week, and I haven't had an opportunity to talk to the commission just because the time didn't allow for it. So what I'm doing now is just conversation. I want to share with everybody that you know, although we are commissioners over all districts, we get the ear quite often of our local more than we do others. So everything I'm saying, I'm talking about a district that's not mine. I want to make it clear. I want to give deference to the person that actually gives and hears the requests of their community. With that being said, I'd like to have a conversation about these rural commercial areas and the master plan resort area on whether or not they are necessary for this particular action, or if they are, if maybe there could be a consideration of putting a special requirement of, for example, must have a proper fire flow or connected to an actual sewer, because we're talking about a major development, or an ecology-controlled large on-site septic system. I just wanted to throw those out because we didn't have an opportunity to talk about that, and this is definitely more your area than it is mine we're talking about.
So just, yeah, you know, in response to that, I would actually be more comfortable removing Union and Hoodsport from the conversation on this altogether. I think this initially began as a conversation around the UGAs, and I think it makes the most sense in the UGAs, given some of the other requirements that go along with development in the UGAs. And so I do think there makes some sense to what I would call pilot this in the Taylortown Rural Activity Center, given some of the other commercial and industrial type development in that area. I think it makes sense to give that a try first and see what the effects, if any, are in rural activity centers. But I think this is sort of morphed from what our original intent was to address issues in the UGAs to being more inclusive of areas that don't make as much sense for development at this scale. So, you know, I think I would be supportive if we limited it to just the UGAs, but would consider including the Taylortown 1 and 2 RAC as part of the consideration.
Mind if I ask a question? Sure. Would that be easy for you to change the verbiage for that? How would that read if that was to happen? Which one are they under?
It would be under the Rural Lands Development Standards, Rural Commercial 3, 4, and 5. So, yeah, I would reword it to say it would remain the same at height being 2 floors, not to exceed 35 feet, except for ag buildings and some other things. And then it goes on to say, or as reviewed by a special use permit, not to exceed 35 feet in Taylortown RAC only, or something like that. So it was limited to Taylortown exclusively.
55 feet or 35 feet?
Not to, I think.
Not to exceed 55 feet.
I think in Taylortown, we could pilot this and see, you know, I mean, Little Creek is in that RAC, and I mean, that's 5 stories, 6 stories. I mean, that's a tall building. So we know that Fire District 4 has, per our code, has plans in place to address some of that kind of development and has resources to address that kind of development. So it makes sense to maybe consider that, but I don't think we have the same, you know, ability in Union or Hoodsport. So I would maintain the current standard for Union and Hoodsport's RACs, and then consider Taylortown.
Yeah, I could easily make that change.
Could you write something up so we can include that in our motion?
Yes. You want me to do that right now?
Well, if everybody's agreeable. I know that I very
take
much
5
am
minutes.
agreeable.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is that okay? Whereabouts is this rack going out in the Taylortown area?
I've got the map.
Yeah, there's a map, but so it's not, it's a rural activity center, and so it's a planning designation, zoning, you know, so like Shelton is an urban growth area.
Right.
Belfair is an urban growth area. This is more or less a step below an urban growth area in planning terms.
Well done.
We talked yesterday.
Okay.
It's US 101, and
Is it near the casino?
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes. In a portion of it. Where's Lynch here? Lynch is here. So there's a portion north and the southern portion.
Now, also, what about the area where that The area where the county has properties for sale that they're looking at a hotel, that's in the urban growth area, right?
Shelton, urban
Yeah,
growth
that is
area?
considered in there, that's, I know it's closed, but that's still in there.
Yeah, that's within the Shelton urban growth area,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Council, does that answer?
Yes, it
Okay.
does, thank you very much.
Sure.
And then I wanted to address Commissioner Netherland's comments about, I believe, sewer or large on-site septic. All those are addressed regardless of the height limit. We'd address those through our pre-application conferences. They have to meet it regardless if we allowed 100 feet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a huge limiting factor to development is your sewer and water.
Well, this takes care of that for me, because I was only considering putting it in those zones anyway, not in all the rest of it. So I'm good with all that.
Okay.
I'm very comfortable with the outcome of this. Would you like it to be as a motion for an amendment, or you just want to include it?
Say it again.
Would you rather me, would you like me to make a motion to amend what's before us, or do we just want to make our motion to have that included in our amendment?
Yeah, as long as it's stipulated in the motion, I think. And then, you know, maybe have a little bit more discussion about the Taylortown racks. Kel, what would be the ability, if we had made a motion that would maybe look further at, you know, like a quasi-feasibility study for the rack in Taylortown? Are you confident that a motion like this would, do you think it needs to be looked at more, is what I'm saying? Or do you feel like the process was somewhat exhaustive?
I think that because of the pre-application conference where people have to meet all of the code requirements regardless of the height they're going to build, and then that they have to go through a special use permit as well to review review impacts beyond what the code states, I think I feel comfortable limiting it to Taylortown without further review, and I do have a proposal for how it would read. So for each section of rural commercial 3, 4, and 5, and I don't believe there's even an RC5 within Taylortown at this time, but it would say building regulations, height, 2 floors not to exceed 35 feet maximum except for ag buildings, cell towers, antennas, water tanks, or necessary structural elements for an otherwise compliant permitted land use, or as reviewed by a special use permit not to exceed 55 feet only within the Rural Activity Center of Taylortown. And that would be the same for RC 3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
I can do that. Yep.
Maybe verbiage. You don't even need to read it again.
Yeah, I can, if we want to make a motion, I can put that.
If there's any additional deliberation.
I
Okay.
have one more question. Can I ask?
Is there any,
I'm sorry. I can ask later.
Okay,
I'll ask later.
sure.
All right, Mr. Chairman, let's see if I can, see what they have here. I move for the approval of Title 17 zonings relating to raising height limits in certain zones within the urban growth areas of Allen, Belfair, Shelton, and in rural commercial zones 3, 4, and 5, with the exception that, as we had discussed, that this only applies to the rural activity centers of Taylortown, within the rural commercials 3, 4, and 5. Will that work for you?
Yeah. I think we can muddle through that if there's a second. It's been moved and seconded to approve code amendments to Title 17 zoning relating to raising height limits in certain zones within the urban growth areas of Allen, Belfair, and Shelton, and rural commercial zones 3, 4, and 5 in the Taylortown Rural Activity Center, excluding the Union and Hoodsport Rural Activity Centers. Good. Any additional discussion?
I want to make a few comments on, especially from my area up there. you know, it looks like we're just making a big leap towards expansion, and in a sense we are. I want to clarify that we have some serious issues with housing in our community, very serious issues. Here recently we've had tents that are popping up in the little tiny park in Belfair, for example. One of the reasons why this happens and we have so much homeless is because we don't have places for them to go. Supply and demand does have an impact. In Belfair, you can rent a 2-bedroom manufactured home for $1,200 a month because there isn't anything for them to rent. The more ability that we can create housing for people, the more chance that we can keep some of them off the streets, but give a better quality of life for a lot of these people. And in order to get that, it has to pencil, because in this world, when people do developments like that, they want to make a profit, and you can't blame them. That's why they do it, how they make their living. In order for it to pencil, we found that the current limits, it can't pencil. It's not financially feasible for them. So by doing this, we open up the opportunities for having a better quality of life for the people that are living there already, that are finding themselves out of their homes on a regular basis because they can't afford it. And it gives an opportunity for us to start to address some of the problems that we are having with our homeless out there, and allow for people to make a profit and consider us as a viable investment. And so that's why I was very supportive of this from the very, very beginning. It's necessary, especially in the urban growth areas. And that's why they're there. I want to remind everybody, that's why they created the urban growth areas, was trying to move all the people there.
Very good, thank you, Commissioner. Any additional discussion?
I'd like to just say that I'm in support of this also, and it is, we're providing a place for our veterans to go now, but we also have to think about the others that are in our community that need our help. And so I think this is a viable solution, and I'm excited to provide other places for people to live and affordable.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just kind of echo those comments. You know, one of the two things I think are particularly important with this, when we look at how the state drives growth to our urban growth areas, and that's two opportunities that are in front of us as a rural county in particular, but other communities as well. And that is taking advantage and the ability to leverage multifamily tax credits that the state has supported in order to help communities like ours, specifically ours, as well as state building code council changes to allow for CLT buildings. You know, cross-laminated timber is another tool in the toolbox to help make development more affordable and sustainable, and it makes sense in urban growth areas. And so those are two items that I think are particularly impactful to some of the issues that we're trying to address, not just from the standpoint of improving and growing our county's tax base, but also improving housing availability for people who need it across the housing spectrum, whether they be homeless, low-income, workforce, housing, and on up. So I think this is an opportunity for us to capture some opportunity that has been given to us by decision makers at the state level, while still maintaining some level of control over development through the special use permit. So I appreciate staff's work on this, the Planning Commission's work on this, and look forward to seeing how this is implemented going forward. But I think this gives us a chance to begin to leverage some of those other opportunities that are available to communities like ours. Any other discussion?
Just would be nice if my kid who's 16, when he turns 18, could actually live here in the community that he grew up in, because there's a place for him to stay that's affordable.
Okay, hearing no additional discussion, call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, and the motion carries. Moving on to item 11, our board reports and calendar. I'll get us kicked off. We'll have Commissioner Netherland and finish up with Commissioner Trask. Going forward this week, I'm meeting with our internal treatment sales tax recipients to continue work on the behavioral health organization transition that's going to be occurring later this year into 2020. I'll also be having a chance to go meet with Lisa Perry and walk him through the Sierra Pacific Mill here downtown. Very excited about that. I was through there the last time when they were still building it, and so it's quite a finished product, and so excited to take that tour later this week. Have a Mason Transit Authority Policy Committee meeting with Scott Burr from the Hood Canal Coordinating Council. Then I was invited to participate in a conference call with the White House Department of Intergovernmental Affairs to talk about the upcoming trade agreement talks with Mexico and Canada. So I'll be hopping on that later this week, as well as attending the Conservation District's Forest Festival poster awards. And then I also have a meeting with Iwa Lau, who is the Hood Canal District Forest Ranger. We're going to go talk about some of their improvement projects up in the staircase area. They have some road work being done up there to improve access for park visitors, and I know that has an impact on our constituents that live up in the Cushman area as well. So looking forward to getting a chance to get out there with Ranger Lau, and back on Monday for briefings.
We attended the Dr. Hughes retirement party, which was very nice. Great food, by the way. Whoever supplied that barbecued pork, that was something, I'll tell you. Group webinar for Streamflow, Shelton Forest Fest, Port of Allen, and Left Board meeting. I also will be attending the White House Trade Talks discussion. 2000, let's see. I also have a board meeting for the ARC. I'll be attending on behalf of the EDC the 2019 Delegate Welcome Home event that they're having. There's a Allen Community Association meeting, Water 15 meeting, the SR5 Freight Corridor stakeholder meeting, Trails and Lake potluck, briefings, working group phase 2 groundwater, and Harstein Island is having an event. I think it's this weekend, I'm not sure, so I'm putting it in my calendar in case you guys show up, and it is this weekend.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Trask.
It's been a busy weekend. Had a great time at the Forest Festival. That was a lot of fun, lots of very fun events. Went to the Great Band Music Concert. Wow. All I got to say is wow. We had a lot of very talented people in Mason County. This afternoon, Detroit series. Tonight I'll be going to the session wrap-up at the Civic Center. We'll have the representatives in the senator there to give us a wrap-up of what has happened, and good or bad. Tomorrow I have an Open Bay Clean Water meeting. I'll be meeting with some chamber people at Smoke and Nose tomorrow as well. There's a sheriff's breakfast, it's an open meeting Thursday morning at 8 a.m. And then there are 2 events going on tomorrow night. I probably won't be able to make both of them, but there's also the Forest Festival Field Day Poster Award Ceremony. I'll attend that, and there's also a speed networking chamber event at Alderbrook. Then we have the Republican Women's Monthly Meeting, and then also Oakland Bay Day is Saturday. I'd encourage everyone to go out to Oakland Bay. It's from 11 to 2:30, I believe. And then that brings us back to Monday for their county briefing. I'll probably also go out to Alderbrook and try to learn how to golf.
I may attend the speed networking also.
Okay, very good. Any other items?
Oh, also, I will be on the conference call.
All right.
Move we adjourn.
We're adjourned. Have a good day.